What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some must-draft league-winning running backs in 2024 fantasy football. And I'm not just going to be throwing some names out there. I'm actually going to be looking back all the way back to 2017 to find every single league-winning running back, grouping these guys together and figuring out what types of players we should be targeting in different spots of your drafts. So since 2017, there have been 24 running backs with a win rate of 16.7% or higher. And I chose that 16.7% number because in theory, if you're in a 12-team league and everyone has an equal chance of winning that league, you have an 8.3 repeating percent chance of actually being the winner, a 1 in 12 shot. So 16.7%, that's pretty much double, 8.3 repeating. So these are players that just by drafting them one pick in your fantasy leagues, at least doubled the chances of winning your actual league. And winning running backs can be found in every stage of your fantasy football drafts. I think some people think you can only find these guys, round 1, round 2, early on in your drafts. And while it definitely is important to hit on those early guys, league-winning running backs can be found in literally every single round of your fantasy drafts. So I split these guys up into different categories, and I do want to start off with the early round running backs. And drafting an early round running back typically is a little bit riskier than drafting a wide receiver. They're going to be more susceptible to injury, but we've also seen that they come with more upside. And since they can come with more upside, that's why when I'm actually targeting running backs in the early rounds, I'm looking at the ones that actually have that ceiling. Since 2017, there have been 9 league-winning running backs, only 2 league-winning wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds. So, like I said, pretty big difference in the type of upside these players can give you. And so let's actually take a look at the 9 league-winning running backs within the first 24 picks. So we have 2017 Todd Gurley. We actually have Christian McCaffrey on here 3 times, 2018, 2019, and 2023. We have 2020 Alvin Kamara. We have 2021 Jonathan Taylor, 2020 Dalvin Cook, 2017 Le'Veon Bell, and then 2021 Austin Eckler. So you can see up on the screen here, I pretty much took, the stats from all of these guys, and then I averaged them out. So we have rush attempts per game, rushing yards per game, targets per game, receptions per game, receiving yards, total opportunities, scrimmage yards, touchdowns, and then PPR points per game. So you can see those numbers for all 9 of these league-winning running backs, and then I also averaged them out. So you combine all these guys together, they're averaging 17.3 rush attempts per game, 84 rushing yards, 6.1 targets, 4.8 receptions, 42.9 receiving yards, 23.4 total opportunities, 127 scrimmage yards, 1.2 touchdowns, and then 24.3 PPR points per game. So this is just kind of a baseline on when we're looking to find these league-winning running backs. We want to see which guys can actually get in range, of these specific metrics. And you don't have to be able to hit all these numbers, right? You're going to see some of these running backs like a Jonathan Taylor, a Dalvin Cook. They definitely excelled more with their rushing volume. They weren't super high volume pass catchers. Guys like Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, they maybe didn't have the same massive workload on the ground, but their receiving production kind of carried them. So it's not like you need a player to be able to hit every single one of these numbers, just kind of a baseline to kind of look at here. And so I just wanted to run through all the running backs that are currently being drafted within the top 24 picks, and I'm just going to break down whether or not I think they have that game-breaking upside. Pretty much, do they have 21.5, 22 plus PPR point per game upside? We saw the lowest point per game number was Austin Eckler. So can they actually hit that number, in a reasonable ceiling? So starting off with the RB1, Christian McCaffrey, 100% he can be a league winner. 3 of the 9 league winning seasons since 2017 of those early round picks have been Christian McCaffrey. He did it last year, definitely in range to do it again this year. So no brainer, Christian McCaffrey definitely can do it. Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is definitely someone who could be in range of that league-winning season. In his healthy games last year, he averaged 15.5 carries and 6.5 targets per game in his 13 fully healthy matchups. When he was finally cleared for a full workload, he averaged 20 PPR points per game. He did that while only scoring 9 touchdowns in those 13 games, and he had pretty horrendous quarterback and offensive line play. So he was giving you 20 points per game. You upgrade the quarterback, you upgrade the offensive line, he hits in the touchdown department. Outside of CMC, Breece Hall is probably the most reasonable case for someone who could be, 22 plus PPR points per game. I definitely think that's in his range of outcomes. So definitely think Breece Hall could have that type of upside. Now shifting over to the running back 3 in ADP, we have Bijan Robinson, and I'm pretty much going to throw out last year. He was in a committee. Did not have a huge opportunity share. It was a very weird situation. That's not something we're expecting here in 2024. Talent-wise, I think Bijan definitely has the 3-down skill set to give you solid receiving usage, also be a great option on the ground. And I think he also has the workhorse size where he could handle a monster workload, with this Falcons offense. This offense is definitely going to be better than last year. You have Arthur Smith is gone. They brought in Kirk Cousins. If the Falcons actually want to feed Bijan Robinson and Kirk Cousins looks good coming off of that torn Achilles, I definitely think game-breaking season is in the range of outcomes here for Bijan Robinson. Then the current running back 4 in ADP, Jonathan Taylor. And I think a lot of people are going to think, well, of course he has that type of upside because we literally already saw him do it in 2021. And it's true, he was a league-winning running back in 2021. But this is a different offensive situation here in 2024. And I'm kind of hesitant that he can repeat that type of production. Of the 9 game-breaking seasons we've seen since 2017 for these top 2-round picks, Jonathan Taylor had the fewest targets, receptions, and receiving yards of all of those running backs, and then also the second fewest points per game. So he had one of the weaker seasons and was especially weak in terms of his receiving usage. Where JT absolutely smashed was his rushing volume, his efficiency, and his touchdowns. And I think the question this year is, can Jonathan Taylor actually get to that 20 touchdown mark that he was at in 2021? Because with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, Richardson is going to be involved on the goal line with his legs. He's going to be vulturing. And I'm not saying JT is going to be super underwhelming in the touchdown department, but I think projecting him to have like over a touchdown a game seems, a little bit sketchy. Like that's not something I want to be locking in for him. And then is there any chance he improves on his receiving production? I just don't see it. Probably more target competition than he had in 2021. A quarterback who can use his legs, probably not going to be checking down a ton. And then I just don't know if he's going to see an increase in rushing volume, and he was already super efficient. So if I think he's going to go down in touchdowns, I think he's probably going to go down at least a little bit in his receiving usage. It's tough for me to see him hitting like that 22-plus point per game number. Maybe you disagree, but those are my thoughts there on Jonathan Taylor. The running back 5 right now, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think a lot of people may write him off to have this type of upside because they're going to look at his lack of volume. And it's true, he's not going to be competing with some of the absolute workhorses on that list that I was showing you guys. But 2020, Alvin Kamara, 2021, Austin Eckler, those kind of seem like peak usage outcomes for Jahmyr Gibbs. That season in 2020, Kamara was splitting carries with Latavius Murray. In 2021, Eckler didn't have a super established running back 2, but he was kind of splitting with a running back carousel. Looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, he averaged 19.4 PPR points per game in his last 10 games last year. That was after he returned from a hamstring injury. So he had a slow start to the season, got hurt, came back, and pretty much just, balled out when he was back on the field. They kind of unleashed him, and he nearly hit that 20 PPR point per game number. Jahmyr Gibbs had 12 carries per game last year. I expect him to be a little bit more involved this season. Maybe he bumps it up to 13 area. I don't think that's crazy. And I feel like then he's a couple more targets a game away from having that 22 point per game upside. I'm not saying it's a super likely outcome, but I think he's someone who didn't even hit in the receiving department last year like we know he can. So if he has a monster receiving season, which he definitely will have one of those at some point in his career, I do think if he can keep the rushing efficiency from last year, he's going to have touchdown upside. Maybe not, to some of these other workhorse level because he's going to be splitting with David Montgomery, but he was still, totally fine in the touchdown department last year. I do think Jahmyr Gibbs has that in his wheelhouse. The running back 6, Saquon Barkley, I think he's kind of in a similar situation to Jonathan Taylor, where a lot of people are going to assume this is definitely in his wheelhouse. In 2018 as a rookie, he was a 24 PPR point per game guy. And at that time, back in 2018, I would have definitely thought Saquon would be a guy who would have his name up here on this chart multiple times, potentially the same number or even more than CMC, just in terms of how great he looked as a rookie, but it just has not played out that way. He's dealt with different injuries, and I don't think it's crazy to say that the Saquon Barkley we have here in 2024 is not the same guy that we had in 2018. That's not to say that Saquon's a bad running back or that he's just fallen off tremendously, but 2018 Saquon Barkley was a generational running back. And that's just not what we've seen over the past few seasons. Even when he's been healthy, it just hasn't been the same guy. And obviously it's not his fault, but I think it's just kind of the reality of the situation we're in. And so ideally, to be a game-breaking running back, you need decent rushing volume. you need some receiving volume, and you need that touchdown upside. Those are kind of like, the three buckets here we want to fill. You definitely need at least two of those buckets. So, maybe you're not dominating in the rushing volume, but you have a great receiving season, you hit in the touchdown department. Maybe you're not dominating in the receiving area, but you're dominating in the rushing volume, like we saw with a JT, a Dalvin Cook in their seasons. So if you dominate enough in one spot, you can kind of, overcome not having a great performance in one of those buckets. My issue for Saquon here is that there are question marks with both his receiving usage and his touchdown upside. The Eagles are just not going to heavily target the running back position. We know with these mobile quarterbacks, they're not typically looking to check down. When, things break down, they don't see stuff downfield, they use their legs, they get out of the pocket, they extend plays. They're not looking to just dump it off to the running back a million times a game. And then looking in the touchdown department, the Eagles have just been so effective with the tush push. Jalen Hurts has been vulturing opportunities at the goal line. It's tough for me to see like a 20 touchdown season out of Saquon Barkley. I mean, maybe they shift away from it a little bit with Jason Kelce retiring and Saquon just rips off a ton of big plays. But if I have serious question marks about his receiving usage and his touchdown upside, it's tough for me to say with a lot of confidence that that's in his range of outcomes here, especially when we haven't seen him even come close to it since his rookie season. After Saquon, running back 7 right now, Kyren Williams. He actually was a league-winning running back last year, but the fact that he was undrafted definitely played a huge role because it's not like you were picking him in the first 2 rounds. Now he is not getting that discount, right? You're not getting a 21.3 point per game running back off of waivers or like the final round of your fantasy drafts. So last year, Kyren smashed in overall usage. He smashed in touchdowns. I just feel like with the addition of Blake Corum, it's tough for me to see him replicating what he did in 2023, especially his workload. And that 21.3 point per game number, at his current ADP, like I don't think repeating that season is going to be a league-winning season for him. And so the fact that I think he's probably going to regress, don't think Kyren has a great shot of being considered like a league-winning running back at the end of the season. Next up is going to be Derrick Henry, and maybe to some people's surprise, Derrick Henry has actually never had above a 12% win rate season, and I think the big reason for that is just his lack of receiving usage. It's limited him from hitting a 21-plus point per game season. He did average 24.2 points per game in 2021, but that was only 8 games before he suffered a season-ending injury, and that was also on a ridiculous 27.4 carries per game. So it's not even like I'm looking at that season and I'm like, well, if he gets 27 carries a game for the Ravens this year, he could do it. Like, the Ravens are not giving this man 27 carries a game. That is insane, and it's not shocking that he was only able to play 8 games that season. I really like this landing spot with the Ravens, and by me saying that someone doesn't have this league-winning ceiling, it doesn't necessarily mean they're like terrible picks at their price. Like, I'm totally fine drafting Derrick Henry back end of round 2, but I do think expecting him to come out all of a sudden have the best fantasy season of his career at age 30, that seems like it's not super likely, so not something I'm going to lean into here. Also keep in mind that back in 2019, Derrick Henry played 15 games, he averaged 20.2 carries per game, 5.1 yards per carry, scored 18 total touchdowns, and he still didn't hit 20 PPR points per game. So without that receiving production, he could just be dominant on the ground. He could have a massive workload, be getting into the end zone, be super efficient, and it's still going to be really, really tough to get, above 21, 22 points per game. So I just don't think it's in the cards for Derrick Henry. Running back 9, Travis Etienne. I'm not going to say this is a super likely outcome for Travis Etienne, but you could at least pitch it to me that, like, if you really squint, you can maybe say there's, like, a very small chance of this happening. Etienne's usage was much better last year than it was in his first full season. He was at 15.7 carries, 4.3 targets a game. The problem is his efficiency was bad. He was down at 3.8 yards per carry. That's something where he did not struggle with that as a rookie. He was 5.1 yards per carry, great in terms of rushing yards over expected per attempt, so performed well both, with just the bland yard per carry stat and then also some of the advanced rushing metrics. So you could paint me a picture where he keeps his 2023 usage, maybe bumps it up a little bit, even though I don't know if the Jaguars really want to do that. But he has his 2023 usage, then you give him his 2022 efficiency, and then maybe this Jaguars offense hits. He scores like 1+ touchdowns a game, but it does kind of seem like a lot of mental gymnastics to get there. Even if he had his efficiency from 2022, scored 5 more touchdowns last year, he'd still only be at 20.5 points per game, so you'd really need him to just completely smash in the touchdown department, like a 20 touchdown season, or just have a larger workload or be, ultra efficient. So since he is heading into year 3, I don't think he's necessarily like capped out yet, but it is tough to kind of paint that picture. Like it's going to be a stretch for Etienne to get there. After Etienne, we have Isaiah Pacheco, and I actually keep moving Pacheco higher and higher up my rankings. And even though I am moving him up, him becoming a league-winning running back does seem pretty unlikely. He averaged 15.4 PPR points per game last year, and I do think this Chiefs offense is going to be better. I think Pacheco is going to be better fantasy-wise, but you would need to like bump up his rushing volume, his receiving usage, and his touchdowns. You would need pretty significant increases to a variety of different areas. And I just don't know if that's a, super realistic outcome here for Isaiah Pacheco. And then the final running back who might be going in the top 24, Bijan Achane. And I think kind of similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, it's going to be tough for Achane to hit the usage of most of these league-winning running backs. Like even Eckler's 18.8 opportunities, Kamara's 19.6 opportunities, even those kind of seem like a little bit of a stretch for Bijan Achane, which may lead you to believe like, all right, well, those guys, they were kind of the floor of usage to get to that point per game number. If Achane's not getting there, then he definitely doesn't have a shot. But Bijan Achane is coming off of the most efficient running back season since 1933. He also averaged a touchdown a game, and that was with Raheem Mostert scoring 21 touchdowns last year. I don't think Bijan Achane's ever going to be a huge workload guy, but with an increase in usage, he has been getting rave reviews out of training camp here. I think Achane has the efficiency and the touchdown upside to potentially get to 21, 22 plus points per game. On this offense, even at like a 55, 60% opportunity share, I do think his big playability, his touchdown upside, the efficiency he is going to have within this Dolphins offense, I think it could get him there. So I do think Bijan Achane is someone who has a shot. So just based on all the players I've gone through and then looking at where these guys are being drafted compared to where I have them ranked, my 3 favorite targets here as league-winning running backs for these early guys are Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan Achane. For Breece Hall, I have him ranked as my 4th overall player. I believe he's being drafted as the 5th overall player. So nothing crazy, but I do think Breece Hall has that legit RB1 overall upside. Would not be shocked at all if he outscored CMC. Then Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going pick 12, 13. I have him ranked up at pick 9. I'm pretty firm on taking him over guys like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. On certain platforms, he's going after both of those guys. So I like Jahmyr Gibbs. And then probably the most screaming value for me in this range is Bijan Achane. He's going 2-3 turn area. In my opinion, that is crazy. In his healthy games last year, he averaged over 20 points per game. I probably should have mentioned that when I was talking about him. He was not all that far off in his healthy games. Maybe you think he's too small, maybe you think he's injury prone, whatever it is. I think the upside's there. I would take him early round 2 if I was forced to, based on my player rankings. So getting him 2-3 turn, I love that price tag. Now that was a long time looking at those early round running backs, but I do think it's probably what people are most interested in. But the next subset of league-winning running backs that I saw is these young later round running backs. So you can see guys, Alvin Kamara, James Robinson, Kyren Williams, James Conner, Phillip Lindsay, Kareem Hunt, Bijan Achane, all guys who at least doubled your chances of winning your fantasy football league. 5 of these guys were rookies, and then 2 were second-year players. So Kamara, Robinson, Lindsay, Hunt, Achane, all rookies. Kyren Williams, James Conner were in year 2. So what this is telling me is that a lot of these guys were heading into pretty ambiguous backfields. If you're drafting these later round running backs and you want some upside, you should be throwing darts at some of these younger options. Kamara came in, balled out as a rookie. James Robinson, it was a pretty ambiguous running back room. He was a day 3 pick, but he was the guy who emerged. Kyren Williams stepped up when Cam Akers was struggling, just took over the workhorse role. James Conner benefited from Le'Veon Bell holding out. Phillip Lindsay just came in, produced as a rookie. Same thing with Kareem Hunt. Bijan Achane, we know the story from last year. So those are the types of running backs that I want to be targeting in these later rounds. And so these are just some running back names that I'd be looking at, some younger options. Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Ray Davis. I'm not saying all these dudes are going to go out there, dominate, take over their backfields, be the running back ones, but I think there are at least pathways for these guys to have a lot of upside. For Blake Corum, a Kyren Williams injury really skyrockets him because he probably just walks right into a workhorse role, the same workhorse role we saw, lead Kyren Williams to be a league winner last year. Zach Charbonnet, who knows how this Seahawks backfield shakes out? I feel like people are kind of burying him. Marshawn Lloyd, I've been lower on Josh Jacobs than most, so maybe Marshawn Lloyd comes in, balls out. Jalen Wright, injury to Raheem Mostert. Etienne opens some things up. And then Ray Davis, think he could find a role here with the Bills and then also have some handcuff upside. So those are some of the later round young running backs I'm looking at. Then the next subset is going to be mid-round running backs. So running backs that were picked from round 3 through round 8, we have Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, and Alvin Kamara. So as you can see, we have a decent number of rounds here and not a lot of guys that have actually paid off as being league winners. These are the charts that I've gone through for the running back draft strategy videos and the wide receiver draft strategy videos. The running back dead zone at this point is kind of like round 4 through 7. In previous years, you could argue it's somewhere in this like round 3 through 8 area, maybe 3 through 6. But the 2 rounds where you typically want to be avoiding running backs where they have not paid off are rounds 4 and round 5. Not only do have the running backs not paid off there, but wide receivers have ended up being a great bet. And you can kind of see that here with these rankings. There's just not a ton of options here within these middle rounds. So kind of a spot where it makes sense. It's the running back dead zone. There's not necessarily a specific archetype where I look at these guys and I'm like, this is the type of player I want to target. For Josh Jacobs, had a few years of NFL experience, just kind of all of a sudden began being used as a total workhorse. We have Austin Eckler in 2019. I believe this was the Melvin Gordon holdout year. So Eckler started off as the running back 1, and then even when Gordon came back, he wasn't great, and Eckler had kind of already carved out a role. Tony Pollard, this was him splitting with Ezekiel Elliott, but still being super efficient. Aaron Jones, he was leading this backfield, but you still had Jahmyr Williams. And then Alvin Kamara last year, just as like a veteran, handling a monster workload. So I don't think there's a ton of commonality between these 5. So not really a spot where I'm like really going after these league-winning guys. And then the final kind of subset here of these running backs, I kind of just defined it as random veterans. You have Raheem Mostert, J.D. McKissic, Mike Davis. Raheem Mostert, 2023, nearly hit 18 points per game. I mean, came out of nowhere. People thought this was going to be like a gross committee. It ended up being the most valuable backfield for fantasy. So you're not going to find that, just laying around, pick 160 every year. J.D. McKissic, pretty much undrafted in most redraft leagues. And then Mike Davis, who is just a pure handcuff for Christian McCaffrey. So I guess it's also important to throw out there, I guess going after like these older veteran running backs in the later rounds, it's not great. Even when injuries pop up, typically it's going to favor the younger running backs. So that's kind of my takeaway from here. We saw all those young running backs that had those league-winning seasons. We just did not see the same things out of these veterans, even guys who had, decent opportunities to take over their backfields as handcuffs. So that's going to wrap it up for my must-draft league-winning running backs. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Was a little bit long, but I kind of wanted to break down what you can actually, look for in a league-winning running back, what types of players those guys have been in years past. So thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.